Okay, good morning, everybody. It's Tuesday, February 27th, 2024. Chai, or the 18th of Adar Aleph, the first Aleph, 5784, Hatafshin Pei Daled, and I'm Reva Emunah. And this is Rivkah Emeinu part 5, and we are learning from the sefer called Zot Olah, written by a man named Nir Menussi. You can find beautiful teachings from him and of him on YouTube, both in English and in Hebrew. He's Israeli, but he offers classes both in English and Hebrew. Nashim B'Torah, women in Torah, al pi ha-Kabbalah ve'ha-Chassidut, through the lens of Kabbalah and Chassidut, right? The mystic teachings, the light teachings. So this is part 5, and we are exploring Rivkah Emeinu, and we're exploring the model of a monogamous relationship where one man and one woman travel through life together only with one another their whole lives, right? It doesn't preclude. In fact, he had mentioned before that in a way this can happen. We have the Rivkah Yitzchak parts within ourselves, right? That again, we can meet partners later in life. In fact, we said the difference between Abraham and Sarah is that they grew up together, whereas Yitzchak was 37 when he met Rivkah, right? In other words, he had already had all these experiences, and he had already had the Akedah experience, and right. But what we might even mean something more deeply, that not just that literally, like Yitzchak and Rivkah, was literally that they never had physical relations with another man or another woman their whole life. But also on the mystical level, we're talking about a type of connection between souls that they find such unity and affinity and wholeness in and with one another. And it, again, we might call the language of that codependent, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a relationship where each one is holding more in true self. Each one is holding compassionate kindness towards their own parts. And so they are showing up more present with less grabbing and less agenda and less need to get something from the other one. Receive, yes. Receive feels yummy because you're not dying of hunger for it. You're not a desperation. You're not a basement child, right? But grabbing is desperate because there's so much fear of young parts for survival and for basic worthiness, and and to have a basic reflection of being worthy of love and worthy of care, right? And so sometimes we only meet the Rivkah Yitzchak couples later in life, where we've cultivated more presence for ourselves, more being present to ourself and with ourself with a compassionate presence. And therefore we can offer ourselves it more, and therefore we can offer the other more. Like I'm meeting so many women lately who had very rigid standards of, like, I will never marry a man who smokes weed. Like, that's my bottom line. That's a red flag. That's just unhealthy. That's just an addict. But through their own breaking and their own becoming more compassionate on their own weaknesses and their own failings, there has developed within them a more of a softness of, maybe I don't like that about the other person, and maybe I need to be clear about what parts can work for me and what parts can't work for me. But I can also simultaneously hold more compassion and acceptance that people have different coping mechanisms and ways of regulating their nervous system. And there's so much I don't know. And again, it doesn't mean overriding self-protection in a healthy manner. That's not what we're saying. It's both. Okay. So I'm going to do a little bit of a review because it just will flow better, I think, but then we'll get into the newer text. Ha'idéal ha'monomagi, the ideal of monogamy. Oh, sorry, I see you in the chat, and let me open the chat. Yeah, so somebody wrote in the chat, what about the second marriage part of monogamy? So this is what we're saying. We're saying, in fact, there's such a beautiful Gemara that, speaks about what energies draw generally a couple when it's their first marriage, and what energies tend to draw a couple together when it's their second marriage, right? Or third or fourth, or right? In other words, right? That we've had more experience, we've had more time to cultivate some more healing and some more acceptance and some more patience and some more integration, and and also more fear, and also more, it's okay, there's other parts too, right? And we're coming together more in a self to self way. And so the Gemara says it's so interesting because the first marriage is called mazal. In other words, you're in a certain energy pattern from birth, an energy family, an energy system, and it's likely that from that sort of early engraved energy system, you'll end up with a partner that is going to mirror that system or invite you to start doing the beginning work of the healing of your own system. Mazal, right? It's coming to you from a certain flow. It says, but zivug sheni ze lefi hama'asim. But a second zivug, it's according to our choices, our actions. Meaning we've healed some, not all, of the unconscious motivators and right? Reasons of why we did relationship. Like we might say more parts driven. And because we've been offering our parts some more space to be heard and seen and some more kindness, it's not that we're going to have a relationship of perfection. It's just there has been movement from being largely parts driven to catching when we're parts driven and noticing it. And maybe having even an ability to stop a fight or an argument and say, wow, I'm really in my parts right now. I need to go offer myself some presence before I can have this discussion. Maybe learning, like it took me many cycles of relationshiping to learn to not try to fix things when people are heavy in parts. The Gemara, sorry, I think it's Pirkei Avos, but we have it says, Lo lefayes mishu b'sha'at kaso. Don't try to appease somebody in the hour of their anger because their parts are freaked out right now. It's firefighters. You're just talking to firefighters. Okay. So I hope that began to sort of give an answer that, right, we're able to be more monogamous. And interestingly, by here monogamous, we don't just mean literally, but we mean self to self instead of all the parts to all the parts. Because by self, we mean all the parts are learning to get along better, right? We have a lot of antagonistic parts in earlier relationships, but now we have a little bit of a skill set of how to help parts get help from self, and then parts of you and parts of him also can navigate each other's ecosystems with more reverence and more understanding and more patience and more, not perfection, but just a little bit more skillfully, a little bit more sensitively. Okay. העובדה שאהבתם של יצחק ורבקה הייתה אהבה של אש קשורה למאפיין מרכזי. It's clear that the love between Yitzchak and Rivkah was a love of fire, a fiery love that was binding and bound in this central theme, right? Heyotam hazug hamenomagi hayachid miben ha'avot va'imahot, the only monogamous couple from all of the avot and imahot, all of the ancestors, right? Abraham had Sarah, and then Hagar, and then many concubines, and then Keturah, who is maybe Hagar, right? Or maybe not Hagar. And Yaakov had, Leah and Zilpah and Rachel and Bilhah, right? And I don't know if he had other concubines, right? But Yitzchak, it was just Yitzchak and just Rivkah. כידוע, התורה מתירה לגבר לשאת יותר מאישה אחת. We know that the Torah allows a man to marry more than one woman. ועל כן אישים מקראים רבים, כולל שניים מבין שלושת האבות. And so, because the Torah actually allows this, Avraham had many partners and Yaakov had many partners. Now, I mean, this should be shocking to us. It should ask questions. It should be like, wait, really? Right? נשאו מספר נשים, רבים משתמשים בעובדה זו כראייה לכך שכל מוסד המשפחה המונוגמי הוא המצאה מאוחרת ביהדות ואינו משקף את עמדתה. So some use the fact that Abraham had many partners and Yaakov had many partners to strengthen a position that monogamy only came much later in human history and was sort of a value system falsely imposed, but that's not the Torah's value system, that the Torah doesn't value monogamy. And maybe Yitzchak and Rivkah was a one-off, but the Torah seems clearly to have no issue whatsoever with men having many partners. That's a very good and legitimate question, right? To hold. So it says, yes, some take the position, right? Like we said, that monogamy was artificially imposed as a value system onto us later. Okay? He says, but this position is not, it's not exact at all. Not only does the Torah in many places not elevate it as a value to have many wives or many women, but it actually warns in many places that this is not ideal, meaning you can do it, but it's not the ideal to have many wives, many women, right? Shehadavar eino ratsui. This isn't the ideal. V'sheha-ideal, the ideal vision, hu zugiut monomagit, is a monogamous relationship. One man and one woman. Right? One partner, one partner. Achat hadrachim ha'elu hi ha'uvda ששלושת האבות רצו לכתחילה לשאת רק אישה אחת. again, we're just we're reviewing this. It's on Rivkah 4. Okay. I just wanted to give the flow over in a kind of unblocked way. So he says, and we see that what's a proof that we're not just making this up to, create some Haredi, I don't know what, monogamous, right-wing conservative position, whatever, Well, because Abraham only wanted it to be Sarah, and it was Sarah who suggested that he take Hagar, right? And it was Yaakov's dream to marry Rachel. We don't ever see him having a vision. He found his one woman. He wanted it to be his one woman, right? But two out of the three forefathers, they didn't succeed in materializing the deepest yearning of their heart, which was to do this whole elevation story in such a deep level of intimacy with one-on-one, right? And such a wholeness and such a trust and such a, right? אברהם נתבקש בידי אשתו לשאת גם את שפחתה כדי שתלד במקומה, ויעקב אולץ בידי חמיו לשאת גם את לאה, right? Sarah suggested that Abraham take Hagar also as a wife, and in order that they could have children, and Lavan tricked Yaakov into marrying Leah. ואז נתבקש בידי שתי נשותיו לשאת את שפחותיהן. And then both women suggested that Yaakov also take their handmaidens, right? Zilpah and Bilhah. אבל אחד כן הצליח. But we see that one couple was blessed to hold this kind of super deep intimacy. Yitzchak Avinu notar kol chayav nisui l'Rivkah bilvad. Yitzchak, his entire life was only with one woman, and that's Rivkah. And we see in her name, Rakba, only in her. U'lishnayim hayta zugiut monomogit le'ela u'le'ela. And their relationship is this, becomes the archetype of the deepest, most supernal, elevated union between masculine and feminine. אין זה מקרה שהתורה מעריכה לגבי שידוכיהם ונישואיהם יותר מאשר כל זוג אחר. It's not coincidental that the Torah spends so much time in the story of how they found each other and how they prayed for each other and what was in their consciousness the first time that they met, and right, the whole unfolding of what this type of relationship looks like, right? This type of partnering and meeting one another looks like. Aja sipur masupar pamayim, so much so that the Torah tells this story of how they met and how they married and how God brought their souls together and their bodies together, right? Twice. Mevin kol ha'avot va'imahot megalmim Yitzchak v'Rivkah et hazugiut ha'ideialit beyoter. And the holy masters understood that Rivkah and Yitzchak were creating and left us the maps for the most supernal, beautiful, almost ideal levels of relationshiping, of intimacy, right? ואף נחשבים בחסידות לסמל העיקרי של חיבור בחינות הזכרי והנקבי בהוויה. And it says in the mystical teachings in Kabbalah and Chassidut, they are the archetype, they are the apex of the representation of, not just representation, of the actualization, right, of the masculine and the feminine throughout all of reality, not just a man and a woman, right? But how the masculine and feminine meet and partner, right, throughout all of reality. That's a lot to take in. Okay. Hamonimagiyut hayihudit shel Yitzchak v'Rivkah, this mononymous one-to-one, self-to-self type of mirroring, right, that Yitzchak and Rivkah have, gam b'pasuk mishir hashirim nitzav berosh perkenu. It's also referenced in the Song of Songs in Shir Hashirim, in the pasuk that we began with, Rivkah, and I'm looking back to see if we can find Keshoshana ben achochim ken rayati ben abonot, right? That like a rose amongst thorn, so too is my beloved amongst all the other women, maidens. Shir Hashirim banui kedusiach ben shnei ahuvim. So the Song of Songs is a dialogue between two lovers. It's right. It's like we're listening in to a dialogue between two lovers. Berega mesuyam. So at one moment in time, machlifim bnei hazug divrei ahava, right? They're exchanging words of love, these two lovers, in Song of Songs, in Shir Hashirim. Ubahem ha'ish mashvat ha'isha l'shoshana ben hachochim. And listen to the dialogue of the masculine. The masculine says, right, you are Shoshana ben Hachochim, my one and only rose amongst all the other thorns, right? That's how I experience you, right? And again, in IFS language, this might be self-singing to self. Amongst all the thorny parts, you are the soft, opening presence of love and beauty and harmony and acceptance and kindness, right? In the middle of all those thorny parts. Shoshana ben hachochim ken rayati ben abanot, right? That's how the masculine sings the song to the feminine true self. My beloved, when you are in true self, I experience a soft, blooming, beautiful rose there for me, with me, amongst all the thorns that might be poking at us, all the parts, right? So lovely. V'ha'isha et ha'ish l'tapuach ben atzei ya'ar regilim. And the woman says, well, I experience you like an apple amongst the trees of the forest. This is what the feminine sings to the masculine. Well, when you're in true self, I experience you as an apple amongst the trees of the forest. Wow, even deeper. I think what he's saying is I experience you as an apple tree amongst a forest full of regular trees. There's lots and lots of trees, but they don't all smell like apples and bear apples, right? And by the way, you'll notice the play on words tapuach, apple, and patuach, open. Okay, did you catch that? Keshoshana ben hachochim, ken ra'ayati ben habanot. As a rose amongst the thorns, so are you, my beloved, amongst all the other daughters. And she replies, that's the masculine singing to the feminine. And the feminine sings back, ketapuach ba'atzei haya'al, as an apple amongst the trees of the forest, ken dodi ben habanim, so are you, my beloved, amongst all the other sons. Bein hapsukim shoreret lichora symmetria. So he says, we notice that these two, the call from the masculine to the feminine and the feminine to the masculine, it's symmetrical, right? I experience you as the one and only rose amongst the thorns. I experience you as the one and only apple amongst the many trees of the forest. Okay? Ach lemaaseh, but in practical terms, echad mehem hu chidush muflag beyachas l'sheni. But really, one is very wondrous when we compare the two statements. Okay? Ein kol pela bekach sheha'ish hu tapuach meyuchad b'nei ha'isha. It's not a chiddush when a woman experiences the man as her one and only. We're kind of hardwired for that. He's saying for a woman to say you are the one apple amongst all these trees, that's pretty common for a woman to feel that for a man. It's just the way Hashem created it, right? And I mean, if you want, okay, someone said why. Let me give a maybe a more helpful answer. If you think of it as light and vessel instead of men and women, a vessel is filled by something that makes her feel whole, and she experiences it as being held and received in the shape of her, and it's one piece of the light. But light can fill many vessels, right? Light can fill, and they don't fill one vessel and not feel the same amount of love for the next vessel. They're experiencing giving over light, that's filled, and they go to another vessel and experience giving over light. And we don't get that because we're the vessel. So for us, it's like you are the one thing that could match me and fill me and bring a sense of wholeness and completeness, right? Even impregnate me. I can only be impregnated one at a time, but a man can impregnate many women in one night, right? But sorry, it's a little bit of a course of an example, but it's because it's also biologically true, the mystical concept of giving light or receiving light. Can't hear you, darling.
No, but I hear your example about the light in the vessel and how there could only be one wick inside the glass versus the light itself can transfer to many. And also you see it in halacha that men could have a pilegesh and there's no pilegesh for like the other way around, etc. So a man could halakhically have more than one wife and a woman can't. But why is it that way?
You want to keep holding that. Part of why, if we can ever assume such a thing that we know, right? But for healing's sake, let's assume for a moment that we were receiving this teaching, that part of the reason why is because we have a certain nature and we work with that nature, but also transcending that nature opens up into something even bigger and greater. So he's going to say that by nature, most men will probably feel called to love many women, but when they go through a certain process of consciousness building and elevation, if they can come into focusing all of that energy and realizing that it's to their benefit, that they will feel more intensely. They will know the joy of intimacy. They will know the joy of being deeply held by one woman, deeply held, fully loved, and had held space by, right? One woman holding space for them and place for them and containing them and, right? All of it, soothing them and believing in them and encouraging them and receiving them and allowing them to shine and allowing them to give to her because they need to give, right? That they will have a bliss that is beyond. But it goes through a certain Orla process of reining in their kind of teva nature, which is to want to keep spreading it out, right? And so there's going to be a Yitzchak experience of being bound on the Akeda from the word la'akod, to bind the energies. And right after that, Rivkah's born, right? He took in, so Avraham was like this, expansive, give energy, right? Water. Yitzchak is fire, pull in, focus, contain, bind, so that the experience is so much deeper, so much more whole, so much more authentic, so much more that each one can meet each other on so many more parts instead of that part can meet that part and that part, right? It's very medullal, it's very watered down, it's lovely, right? But this is like, right, if you're willing to be fully seen and fully show yourself and fully see the man and fully, right, the mutuality of that, right, and fully help him, and or not help him, but hold space for him to fully meet himself, just feel how full that feels, right? And how scary. He's called Pachad Yitzchak, the fear of Yitzchak, because to give oneself over into vulnerability, that every part of you is known and seen by the other person. Every part of you is seen and known by yourself. Every part of you, you're not in a relationship where you're hiding yourself from the other, right? You're in a relationship of like good, bad, ugly. This is it. And I'm committing to the authenticity. It doesn't mean, again, that we don't have holding, we don't hold back, we don't have discernment, and we're not taking it to an extreme position. But we're saying that the intention is to really relationship, not run and turn away when there's parts that are too scared but keep trying to meet each other, keep trying to meet the fear that says intimacy is too scary, is too much, closeness is too scary. Keep meeting those parts and those fears and moving towards each other and giving each other space, right? And keep the relationship going. Even with the fear parts and even with the critics and cultivating self. Okay.
Wait, can I ask one more question on this subject before we move on? Sorry.
More than one. Yeah.
So if you look at the opposite, right? Shlomo Melech had a lot of pelagishes, and he had a lot like abundance, right? And he was actually criticized for that. Like there was one, like it says in Pirkei Avos that it wasn't looked up upon that he had so many wives, and it swayed him in random ways. Now we look at Yitzhak, and you're saying the ideal is for a man to rein in to one energy force, into one woman. Then why is he the only one who was truly monogamous? And Abraham, Yaakov, and all the ones after him. I think even Moshe Rabbeinu had more than one, right? Did he? I don't think so. Actually, no, I think we only know about Sipporah. Well, whatever. We could assume maybe he did, maybe he didn't, because it doesn't make a point to say one way or the other. But then why is Yitzhak the only one to do that practice if it's so high?
Well, I think you just answered, right? We're not all wanting or willing to always do the most high practices. Only the ones who really want to have that most high experience and are willing to mitzamtzem, right? It's very painful work to rein in one's natural desire, right? It's like you're super hungry right now, but you wait 15 more minutes. Not as a practice of suffering, as a practice of expanding your vessel to take a minute to really appreciate the food and where it came from and all the people that were involved in its production and getting to your table. And right, it's actually to increase your enjoyment, but it is having to rein in the halitanina part that says, I'm going to die if I don't get pleasure right now in this second, right? It's you can feel that like Yitzhak, again, he's 37 when he gets married,
A long
right?
time.
Yeah, right. There's okay, yeah. Okay. So okay. במילים אחרות, in other words, פסוק זה מבטא יותר מכל את הבחירה המונוגמית. He's saying, he wants us to notice that for men, monogamy is to make a choice. הבחירה, the choice, להתמסר לשושנה אחת, to relationship with the one rose, to focus one's energies. And Chacham Yirmiyahu was sharing with me last year that there's a way that a man begins to relationship that his wife and the Shekhinah is one thing. That he always sees his wife as the Shekhinah before him, right? And he's always in understanding that he's relationshiping almost a double relationship of the collective life force and Hashem, but also that his entire relationship with God and himself is happening through this one reflection. Everything about his, right, like in therapy, we say transference and countertransference, like we learn about who we are in relationship, and then we can correct through the reflection, through the transference and countertransference. Well, the Yitzchak energy and masculine, and this is what Chacham Yirmiyahu was giving over, is he begins to understand that everything happening with his wife is reflective of his relationship with Shekhinah. And then she's Esther Hamalka. She not, it's not to take away her humanness. It's all one thing. It's not separating her into some spiritual being only. It's the wholeness and totality of her spirit and her body and all of it. And again, you asked a beautiful question, and the Holy Masters answer it on multiple levels, because the process happened to Yaakov actually against his will. And the process happened to Avraham also actually against his will, for whatever reasons of needing to grow consciousness. So that's part of an answer we should, include. Okay, so he says, ולראות בכל האחרות חוכים. זוהי סיבה נוספת לכך שהפסוק נדרש דווקא על רבקה. He says, now, I'm going to say, something that can be perceived or heard as very controversial, and that's okay with me. But something that he's giving over is he's also saying the process that Yitzchak went through on the Akedah was as painful for a man as feeling like he's going to be shechted. It's a death, it's an ego death of, I'm not going to have the blonde and the redhead and the dark haired and the straight haired and the tall one and the plump one and it's for a man that to reign in that consciousness that I'm going to give myself over fully to one woman. We don't understand how painful that is for them. right? It's imagine when you had a contraction and they tell you don't push, and you have to work against everything that's telling you push, right? Sorry, but you have to pee really bad and you have to hold it in. You have to work against the flow and have that level of holding, right? Until the right moment. He says, that's what a man goes through when trying to commit to one woman, right? And it's like a hero's journey for them to decide that there's never another woman for me. And it's rak ba, Rivkah, only in you. Because I choose to see you as the Shekhinah, right? As my whole relationship with reality, of my relationship with my own heart, right? And to see that you are my oracle. Anything that God wants to teach me and show me about myself, he will show me that through you. And I understand that I'm getting an oracle. See, men don't know how to use, and I don't mean use in the yucky sense, use. I'm saying receive the gift of, work with, that the malchut is that we're the oracle. We're always reflecting to them about themselves, much like plant medicine, right? It's reflecting your own thoughts to you, your own yearnings to you, your own heart to you. You're learning about yourself from what's being shown to you. Okay? Ein ze mikra shadavka zug hagvura. And it's no coincidence, again, that the couple whose energetic gifting is gvura, right? Power, might, discipline, knowing how to focus energies, hold energies, contain energies, direct energies, so that they can ultimately bring the greatest bliss, right? Has zivug hamashul le'esh, the couple that is likened to fire. Hu hashomer al ha'idi al hamanamagi. This is, right, holding this kind of ideal vision of monogamy, right? Not as like a political or a social system, but as really a beautiful experience of when one human being fully gives themselves over to another human being, and vice versa, and sees within the other the whole unfolding of reality and God and love, right? ברובד הפשוט ביותר, in simpler terms, היכולת לרכז את כוחות אהבתנו באדם אחד בלבד דורשת גבורה רבה. Now, he's saying this to all of us, but he's saying it even more to actual physical men. He's saying the power and strength that it takes to draw and concentrate all of your love as a man and direct it to one vessel takes enormous gvura. Ulam me'ever lekach, and certainly more than this, ka'asher hakesher hazugi nirchash be'amal behitgabrut, and especially bli levater ubli להתייאש מהקשיים, הוא מגיע לגבהים שזיווג של חסד לא מסוגל להגיע אליהם. He says, and at the same time, because there's so much concentrated energy here, it also gives you these wells and sources, because you've decided to do it one-on-one, that when you reach the times of deep despair and exhaustion, you have a certain reserve, because the energy hasn't just been right kind of watered down by leaked out into all kinds of other relationships, right? This is why, like, emotional affairs, even though they're not halachically, maybe they probably are, but let's pretend that they're halachically not a problem. I'm not in yichud with the person. I never touched them. They never touched me. But what they do is siphon off energy that the man is meant to be putting into his wife and into his monogamous marriage, but that energy is being siphoned off, is no longer available to his wife. She feels that, right? And again, the dance begins of the breakdown of the energies between them and the watering down of the energies between them. Okay. So he says, so a fire relationship can take you to places and heights that a water relationship can't. עוצמת החיבור של יצחק ורבקה מתבטאת בכך שהם הזוג היחידי מבין האבות שזכינו להצצה לקשר האינטימי שלהם. Right? They're the only ones that reach this such a deep level of wholeness with one another, right? To feel at home with one another, to feel safe with one another, right? To feel kindness from one another and towards one another. They reached these places that no other couple reached. That the Torah gives them the greatest compliment that Yitzchak is playing with Rivkah in the field, Rivkah, his wife, that they play together. Yes, there's sexual reference here, but beyond that, they play. They know how to work through parts with a certain acceptance of each other and a certain laughing and humor towards themselves and their parts, because there's trust and safety, right? That they're not going to cheat on each other and betray each other. And as much as parts might go cuckoo bananas, they're not going to be dealing with energies of betrayal and lying, that there's trust. And that trust is so yummy that it allows, like, I know for myself, I'm a hilariously funny person, but I'm not almost usually, clowning helped bring me heal in this a lot. But by and large, that side of me, especially with men, I only show that side of me when I feel super safe and held, because it's a very I don't use humor to deflect. I use humor for intimacy. Some people use humor to deflect. That's different. They're dafka funny with people they're not close with because the humor is a defense mechanism. For me, the humor is to invite people into the vulnerable places. It's not a defense mechanism. And so it's so vulnerable. It's so childlike. It's so fun. It's so innocent that I have to feel a level of safety. And it says Yitzchak and Rivkah had that. They had this delicious playfulness with each other, right? Hamila mitzachek hi lashon shashua ve'oneg. The word mitzachek, right, from the word tzchok, to laugh, and it sounds like the word misachek, to play. He says, the Holy Masters say, is a language of delight and pleasure. Delight and pleasure, right? That energy where you actually really like spending time with the person. It feels delightful and pleasurable because it's held in something deeper. It's held in commitment. It's held in trust. It's held in deep kindness, such kindness that it allows your heart to like blossom. And he says, much like Yitzchak's name is Mitzachek, is Yitzchak. I will be the one who will make the feminine laugh and play. and allow these parts of her, because we laugh at our parts together, and it calms them down a lot, and it helps them a lot, you know. Rabbi Akiva Amar, so Rabbi Akiva said, Ish ve'isha zachu shrina b'neihem. When a man and a woman reach a certain level of self to self, shrina b'neihem, they feel the presence of the divine between them, in them and between them. Something feels really good. Lo zachu, but when we're trapped in, parts, esh ocholtan, it feels like being burned by fire. It hurts so much. It feels like, as scary as fire is and how destructive fire is, not the warming, yummy fire, right? This is like the fire of, burning the house down fire, right? Rage and fear, and like, just think of the parts when they're at firefighters, right? Pun intended. Amra zu and this is a very famous Torah, right? When we meditate upon the words ish and isha, ish, a man, aleph yud shin, and isha, aleph shin hey, right? We see that what they have in common is the aleph and the shin, esh and esh, right? Fire and fire. Shtei hamilim morkavot mehamila esh. Both of these words are made up of the word esh, aleph, shin, fire. B'tziruf ot yichudit halekucha mishmo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then the two letters that are left, it's a very famous Torah, right? So we have ish, man, isha, woman, and they have in common aleph, aleph, shin, shin, which spells the word aleph, shin, esh, fire. And then with the addition of the word for man having a yud, right? And ish, and the word for female, isha, the feminine, having a hey. So we're left with a yud and a hey, which of course is the name Jah or Yah, right? Hashem's name with the numerical value of 15, right? And again, so many yummy things, 15, like the day of the month when the moon is full. So both sides are feeling really full, and there's a lot of meeting of self to self. Okay. Okay, so he says, Yud במקרה של האיש וה' במקרה של האישה, איש ואישה זכו, מתאר מצב שבו שני בני הזוג מזקקים את עצמם ומבליטים את הנקודה האלוקית שבהם. So this is a type of relationship where both have worked with a lot of their parts and brought consciousness and compassionate awareness to a lot of their parts. And so they're able to have a more self to self, godly to godly, divine to divine type of meeting. Yotzrim bekach et Hashem HaKadosh Yah, which is reflective in the Hashem's name, Yud and Hey. L'umat zot, and in contrast, Lo zachu, when we're not in this type of relationshiping, hu matzav shebo bechinot elo metushtashot. Umishnei tzdadim noteret rak esh shel ka'as v'ta'ava. He says this is when we might be very polarized in parts that are very driven by fear and very driven by desire. Right, so there's less self-presence. So there's less sort of relaxed playfulness and trust and commitment, and right, and the parts are now feeling, maybe really polarized and in extreme positions of anger and fear and desire. Le'ahavat shchina b'neihem, this type of love where we feel the divine presence there with us. Higiu Avraham v'Sarah. This is the experience that Avraham and Sarah reached. Zug HaChesed, the couple of loving kindness. The couple of kindness. Ach Yitzchak v'Rivkah, but Yitzchak and Rivkah, Zug HaGvura, the couple of might and strength and discipline and concentration of energies and containing energies and holding. They Hamonamagi, this monogamous couple, Shekula Havatam Memukedet Echad B'Sheni, that all of their love was focused on one another, right? Loving one another and accepting one another and learning through one another and understanding that we learn about God and ourselves by relationshiping with this one other, as well as ourselves, of course. So they reached a depth of an ability to love, an ability to hold love and witness love and be forgiving in love and be kind in love and love more fully and more vulnerably. And right, ahava hametakenet et yisod ha'esh atzmo, that a love that actually fixes the element of fire, right? It turns it into a fire of warmth and warming oneself, right? And warming the other and receiving warmth from oneself and receiving warmth from the other and sharing warmth, right? It becomes a fire of warmth and compassion. באהבה זו, יסוד האש וגילוי השכינה אינם סותרים זה את זה. And in this type of love, the fire, the element of fire and the revelation of the presence of the divine is not in any way contradictory. There's warmth and love and passion and excitement and playfulness and divinity and holiness. It's all at the same time. Esh hazugiut hi gilui hashrina ben bnei hazug. The opposite, their connection is actually a revelation of God there, but in them and between them. Okay, we'll just finish this paragraph. Rayon ki esha ahava yachola lehavot kli legilui shrina. He says the idea here is that there's a type of fire of love. There's a type of love that's a kind of a fire, and it's able to create a vessel, an ability to hold and actually hold presence for and reflect the presence of God here, the presence of the divine love here. Ramuz bepasuk mufla nosaf mishir shirim, and this is hinted to in an additional pasuk, a wondrous teaching, also from Song of Songs. Azah kemavet ahava, right? Love is as strong as death. Kasher kishaol kin'ah, and it's as strong as the depths of jealousy, right? In other words, these energies can show up in a shadow way, but they can also show up in a healing way. Rishapea rishpe esh shalhavetia, right? It's like these almost like crackling, ascending flames of longing and yearning and excitement. בביטוי אש של הוותיה הופכים השם הקדוש יה ויסוד האש מנוגדים למשולבים. He says, and in this expression, a flame of longing, an elevating flame, we experience an integration between the element of fire and the divine, instead of being pitted and butting heads against each other, that like one is called desire and lust and desire to receive from himself alone, and one is called goodness and holiness and right? And a desire for the divine, that they're not butting heads, but they're one thing. Okay. I hope everybody has a blessed and beautiful, beautiful day. Happy